Before we talk about Mortal Shell 2, I think that we need to talk about Mortal Shell 1. Because when it comes to Souls-likes, I think that at that time, for whatever that had come prior to, at least up until that point, Mortal Shell was one of my favorite Souls-likes, even though that I do recognize now that it was very lacking, and we'll talk about in which aspects was that game lacking. Let's also talk about Souls-likes, because one thing that I like to refer to them to, and it actually makes sense at least to me, is that there's a huge difference between Souls games and Souls-likes. Because Souls games are the games made by From Software. I said that several times. Souls-likes are games like those games that From Software makes. Back then, up until that point, in my personal opinion, the only Souls-like worthwhile playing, and the only one that I think that it was good enough, it was just Neo. Other than that, you had the the problem that we had with Lords of the Fallen, the first Lords of the Fallen, and then we had the Surge, which I think that it was decent, but I didn't like it that much. The first Souls-like was Lords of the Fallen, and that game was a mess, and a real mess. Now, when Mortal Shell released, there were a couple of other titles that were on the horizon that were already planning on release, like Thymesia, which I didn't like that much either, Steel Rising, and things like that. Now, I think that the highest regarded Souls-likes that we have out there are things like, outside of Neo, of course, are Lies of P, the first Berserker Kazan, Black Myth Wukong, and Stellar Blade. There are many things that are just rising here. But what is it that Mortal Shell failed to deliver, even though that I personally think that it was a good game? Because we also have to enter into the context that back in the day, people were regarding it as a very good game. The reviews that you had back then are actually based on things that were releasing at that time. Now we have beta games that actually managed to grasp the formula of Souls-likes that much better. So yes, if you compare Mortal Shell to Lies of P, you compare to Black Myth Wukong, to Lords of the Fallen 2, or the reboot for Lords of the Fallen, it falls short on so many aspects, but at that time, back then, like, that was one of the best Souls-likes that we had available. One thing that I want to make a huge, and I mean a huge emphasis on, is that a lot of people are not aware that that game was not developed by a small studio. Like, when you play the game, you obviously feel that this is an indie game, that a small studio developed this game, but that doesn't actually fully grasp what Mortal Shell was developed, because it was developed by quite literally 15 people. 15 people developed that game, which in my opinion, it was very good, and I still think that it's good. I played it, and it has received some updates that we'll talk about right now, but the main problem that I had with Mortal Shell, me personally, and I'd say that that's the thing that it makes me be excited about Mortal Shell 2, because of what they have said and because of what we have seen in the trailer, is that Mortal Shell, the first Mortal Shell, was just too small. I shit you not when I say that you could finish the game once you manage to learn how the game is in like 2 to 3 hours. It was that small. And the reason behind that being is that the replayability value would add a little bit more onto that. So let's actually talk about what was it. So essentially you had a couple of shells. I believe that it was 4, which they were essentially your character classes. You wouldn't be able to stat allocate points. You would be locked into those shells, and they would do specific something. Like there was Solomon, that was based on using the parry system that the game had implemented for it. You had limited uses for that. That shell was specifically built for that, and every skill point that you would unlock for that shell would go directly into that. And then you had Hathern, which basically he take advantage the most out of the hardening mechanic that the game implemented. You also had Thiel, I believe that the name was. He had the most stamina out of all of the characters, and he had like a huge flurry of attacks that you could do with the dual wields with poison status ailment. That it was very broken. And then you had the final one, I do not remember the name, but he was basically your boinker, like the heavy hitter. He had lots of defense, lots of health, but he barely had like any stamina. And essentially you would only be able to level up one each given playthrough, and once you go through the first playthrough and you know the areas and you know how it works, then you would be able to finish the game in like 2 or 3 hours. So once you experience the other shells, you wouldn't really get that much juice out of the game. Well, people call the combat clunky in here. I believe that the clunkiness comes from the actual lack of weapon variety. The only weapon that was quote-unquote fast, and it was still somewhat on the medium side, it was the dual-wielding weapon that he had available. But the base of everything and what they gave you to start with, and basically you only had like 4 weapon types, which were 2 great swords, this dual blades, and then there was some kind of like a range type weapon. And then again, you only had resources to upgrade one each given playthrough, so the combinations were not actually that varied because you only had 4 weapons to work with on each given playthrough. And I do not think that it was clunky. As a matter of fact, I think that it was just perfectly paced. It's just that when the 2 main weapons that you have available to the players and the weapon that you start with is a great sword, then yes, of course, it's going to be a little bit more slow. But I think that's my personal gripe with the game, that the game was too short. If you actually take a look at the rest of the game, the graphics still hold up until today, and the actual technical implementations that you have in the game, you have HDR support, you have ray tracing, you have upscaling methods and Unreal Engine 4. The game looks gorgeous, and I think that the overall ambience of a dark fantasy setting is what stands out the most out of this game, because it looks beautiful on a dark, obscure way. And it was just a joy to be there, but it was just a disappointment to be there for such a short amount of time. The other one thing that it had is that once you reach the actual dungeons, which there were just 3 dungeons, they were just very samey. Like, they were very samey, because then again, let's remember, I want to emphasize, there were 15 people developing this thing. And overall they felt like corridors of the same, and you would only have like 3 or 4 different types of enemies in these corridors. Because of that, there were not many boss fights, and not having many boss fights on a Souls-like, then yeah, you're going to struggle for people to like it compared to what we have actually out there now. So having a beautiful atmospheric scenery, it's just not enough right now when Dark Souls 1 presented a beautiful interconnected world that gave you different things to be looking at. You would never be seeing the same thing because the scenarios were always changing, and the level design was always something that keep you engaged where you were visually feasting at that time. So that's one of the other downsides of Mortal Shell, the first game. But I think that the timings, the mechanics, the hardening, the parrying, the iframes and everything that the game had to offer, and the actual proposals that it had, because it was fun actually playing the several classes, because what you would do to level them up, it would be to just straight up purchase new skills that would enhance those actual capabilities that they have. Like, for example, like previously aforementioned, the Hadron would have mechanics that would increase the amount of time that you would be able to be on the hardening stance, or the amount of damage that you would deal after you finish that up, and the amount of time that you would be able to regain back that skill or that mechanic, because there was time you couldn't spam it, you could not spam that, so you would have to be waiting. He would enhance that so you wouldn't have to be waiting that long, and that's one specific class for him, and it was actually kind of cool experimenting that kind of stuff, while Solomon parrying like a maniac and dealing a huge amount of damage and diminishing the amount of windows that you have to actually use to deal tremendous amounts of damage with parrying. It was just something cool. So I think that now that we have discussed all of those aspects that Mortal Shell was lacking, how can they improve upon that on a sequel, and how can they actually outstand with the actual good releasing titles? Because we now have Titans, we not only have Souls games now to compete now we have to compete with the very good Souls-likes that we have out there, like the First Berserker Kazan, the Neos, which are several of them, Lysope, Black Myth Wukong, even though that a lot of people do not consider Black Myth Wukong to be a Souls-like. There's many good Souls-likes out there now that you have to actually fight to be a good game for. What makes me so excited about Mortal Shell then, the sequel? Well, when it comes to weapon variety, I was able to spot up to 8 different weapon types on the trailer that you see that I'm playing right for you right in here in the background. So you have the swords, you have great swords, the ultra great swords, you have axes, you have heavy axes, you have dual wields, you have maces, dual wield maces, spears, ranged weapons. The ranged weapons also seem to be different, like there seems to be different types of ranged weapons. You have like this shotgun type weapon and then this like assault rifle kind of weird weapon. So when it comes to weapon variety, there's a whole bunch of stuff to be had in here. Shells, you have returning shells from the actual previous game, but also you have new shells that would add on top of that. So I think that also this is a open world game, and I do believe that if you go to their website you will see this. They are actually hiring people so that they're striving to grow. They're trying to make a bigger studio so that they can make a bigger game. I think that the foundations of Mortal Shell were just right. The game felt good to play, it was beautiful. It just, the only gripe that I had with the game is that it was lacking on content. They've also said that in this open world that you're going to have right in here, there's going to be 60 dungeons. You had three dungeons on the first game. Now you're going to have 60. Of course, I'm thinking that they are going to be smaller, but also remember that the dungeons in the first game were not really that big. Like, I do want to stress out that you could finish the game in like 2 or 3 hours once you knew how it worked, because they actually didn't keep up with the game. They kept adding updates, and one thing that I did that it was masterfully done is adding the roguelike new playthrough, where you would essentially have a roguelike, and each individual playthrough you would have to continue without dying, unlocking new skills so that you could get more legendary weapons as you grow up, or new legendary upgrades. And that's something that you could go back to play right now, and I think that's what the game needed, because if I have to give you a recommendation, go back to play Mortal Shell, feel how the game feels, but immediately start playing the Virtue Cycle, which is the DLC that adds the roguelike mode, because it's just Mortal Shell infinitely on this infinite loop where you always have this reward system of dying and going back again, back and forth, back and forth, and back and forth. The only downside then again is that you're not going to have that many boss fights. There's always going to be the very same boss fights always. Now I'm thinking that with the sequel and having this new amount of weapons, we have new amounts of shells, we have 60 dungeons, this is going to be great. I think that this, if they manage to pull this off, this can compete on the Souls-like market that we have right out there. But let me know in the comment section down below. I want to know, I want to hear from you. What was the issue or not issues that you have with the first Mortal Shell? Did you like it? Did you not like it? And do you think that this is going to be good based on all of this information that we have with this new content, that there's just going to be I think that this is going to be a huge game. If you like the content, so you like it, super appreciate it. And also, today you're gorgeous and beautiful person. You're in the gorgeous and beautiful person. Subscribe to the channel. You're in Discord. Have a beautiful day. Goodbye.